Welcome to Educator.com's English composition course. And one of the most important things we have to learn how to write is to make things shorter, also known as how to write a summary. Summaries are like magic. They shrink things down. I want you to look at this article. Do you want to read all this? Do you have time to read all this? Do you think that I could go through this entire lecture and read this word for word? No, that's way too much reading right now. So what if I just read this instead? Samuel Langhorne Clemens, aka Mark Twain, was a popular American author. He was born in Missouri, where many of his stories take place. He struggled financially, but later overcame his debts. He was born when Halley's Comet was visible and died on its next return. Well, that was much easier, wasn't it? Well, what'd I do? Well, I just summarized. And that's what you do when you are writing something and you don't want to quote a large block. You just want to quote part of it. So what is summarization? Well, first off, more important, why do we need it? Well, we need it for those research papers. Later, you're going to be reading several sources. You're going to read book after book after book, and article after article after article, and you're going to need to write in your writing what are the most important and main points of these articles and books in a few sentences, because you don't expect your reader to read the whole thing. So that's why you summarize. Likewise, book reports. Whenever you're writing a book report in school, you have to summarize parts of the story and put it shorter into, take 20 pages and make it one paragraph so that your teacher isn't reading the whole book. Now, outside of school, there are still times when we need to summarize. Working in an office, being an administrative assistant, is one of the most important places where people have to summarize. Political aides. Presidents are busy people, and so are governors, and so are congresswomen, and so are senators. And they have an army of aides around them to read important documents and then summarize it for them so that they don't have to read the whole thing. Also, maybe someday you'll just start your own blog. I mean, who knows? And maybe you'll read something and you'll want to talk about it, but you're not just going to quote the entire article. You're going to quote a little bit of it, right? So the plan for this lesson is a couple things. First, just like with reading, we're going to talk about skimming and scanning. And then we're going to go over details. Finally, I'm going to introduce you to asking the right kind of questions, and then we're going to learn how to summarize a 3-act story. So what is skimming and scanning? Well, skimming is when we're reading an article, but we don't read every last word. What we do is we find words that are repeated over and over again, and we kind of circle those and highlight them. We also pay attention to proper names. If we notice a name keeps coming up again and again, chances are that is a very important thing that we're reading and probably something we want to pay attention to in our summary. Locations and places, events, we also want to circle. And we want to find the keywords, words that signal importance, like is important, or first, second, third, or for example, or for instance. There's a whole list of keywords that we'll be going over in the next few lessons. But for now, just, any word that might say because, or is important, or first, second, third, those are probably important things that you need to pick up on. Paragraph breaks, also super important. When you read a paragraph break, you know that you're reading a topic sentence is probably going to be your first one. Well, chances are your summary is going to need to take all those important points from those topic sentences. Scanning is different. It's when we read every single word and reread thoroughly and reread again and again until we understand it as well as the author intended. Now, to get details, we have to think about our goals first. Our goal when we summarize is to get every single paragraph from a large piece of writing down to about 2 or 3 sentences. So we're actually going to find details, but we are going to ignore very specific and what we call minor details. And we're going to pay attention to the paragraph breaks or other similar divisions to kind of get what we think are the most important points. Now, to find these points, we have to pay attention and read interactively when we scan. And we're going to ask questions like who, what, why, where, when, and how. These are what we call the interrogative questions. What is the author saying about who? What kind of examples is the author giving? Why is the author giving this reason? Where does something take place? When are we paying attention to a history in the story? And how does something work? You can phrase these questions no matter how you like, and we're going to be going over these in next lessons in more detail, but for now, keep them in mind. So let's summarize an article. This is going to be, the next several slides is a big long article that we're going to read together. I'm going to be highlighting some important points here, and then I'm going to give you a huge list of details, and then I'm going to give you a summary. Let's go. Luna Lovegood is a Ravenclaw student who is a year younger than Harry. She is described as having straggly waist blonde hair and often a permanently surprised look. Rowling often described Luna as the anti-Hermione, as Hermione is inflexible and logical as opposed to Luna, who relies on faith. Her father, can't pronounce that, is the editor-in-chief of The Quibbler. When Luna was only 9 years old, her mother was killed while performing spell experiments. Luna witnessed the accident and conceived Thestrals. Luna is at first socially isolated at school, but appears to care little for what other people think. Now let's think about scanning and skimming. What proper name kept coming up over and over and over again? Luna Lovegood, Luna Lovegood, Luna Lovegood. So what do you think this article's about? Paragraph break. In The Order of the Phoenix. Why is the author breaking the paragraph here? She and her father are among the few who believe Harry. Well, who's she? Luna Lovegood. And Dumbledore when they claim that Voldemort has returned. During particularly turbulent years at school, Luna serves as the only person who can quell his temper. As a result, that's a key word, he forms a strong friendship with her. Luna Lovegood also becomes a member of Dumbledore's army. Later in the book, she joins Harry, Ron, Hermione, Ginny, and Neville in the conflict with the Death Eaters in the Department of Mysteries. Okay, so what have we learned about Luna so far? Well, we've learned something about her relationship and friendship with Harry, haven't we? We've also learned that she was in Dumbledore's army. How important do you think these things are? Well, if you read the books, you know they're very important, but how would you know they're important from here? Well, you notice Harry is also a name that keeps coming up again and again and again. In The Half-Blood Prince, wait, why are we breaking up paragraphs this way? After Luna and Neville are snubbed by some of Harry's new fans, she observes that Harry is expected to be with cooler people. Harry later invites Luna to Slughorn's Christmas party. He also does the Quidditch commentary for the Gryffindor game, a scene that Rowling particularly enjoyed writing, calling it blinding inspiration. Later, when Death Eaters attack Hogwarts, Luna, Ginny, and Neville are the sole DA members who answer the call to protect Hogwarts. Okay, so I've noticed a pattern here. I've noticed that the author of this article has broken up this reading by the books. So, what can we kind of expect? What do we think is important so far? What are we learning about Luna? What keeps coming up? Here are details that I've kind of gleaned from what we've read so far. Luna Lovegood has a strange personality and physical appearance. That's the first paragraph pretty much put in one sentence. Luna Lovegood believes Harry about Voldemort's return. Luna has seen someone die. Luna becomes a member of Dumbledore's army. Luna helped with the Quidditch commentary. Luna helps Harry calm down. Luna is a Ravenclaw. Luna fought Bellatrix Lestrange. Luna's protagonist is a silver hair. Luna fights the Death Eaters at the end of Order of the Phoenix. Now, in a moment, I'd like you to pause this recording, and I'd like you to label 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 in that order of what you think is the most important. So, pause this right now, and then in a moment, I'll show you my summary. Here's my summary. Luna Lovegood is a strange, eccentric Ravenclaw who becomes friends with Harry. She is one of the few people who believe that Voldemort returns. In Order of the Phoenix, she joins Dumbledore's army and fights the Death Eaters at the book's climax. She has another chance to fight Death Eaters at the end of The Half-Blood Prince. Finally, at the end of the series, Luna is captured by Death Eaters. However, Luna fights Bellatrix Lestrange after she escapes. She is one of the first to celebrate Harry's victory at the end of the series. Now, was that everything that you thought was important? Well, maybe not. And this is a point I'm trying to make. Part of when we summarize is kind of subjective. Sometimes it's just our preference of what we think is most important. Now, I have cut off some very, very specific minor details, and you really need to do that. Like I didn't talk about Thestrals at all, well, because the author only talked about Thestrals once. But I did talk about Death Eaters several times in Dumbledore's army, because that was referred to several times in the article. I did say this Bellatrix Lestrange thing, that was in a final paragraph that he didn't show you. But I think that's kind of still an important example, even though it's a very minor example of kind of who Luna is and, what kind of person, how brave she is and such. So, now let's go to summarizing stories. There are 2 steps to summarizing story. First off, we have to understand what's called a 3-act structure, and we have to know what a protagonist is. Let's go over these backwards. A protagonist is what we call a lead character or a main character. They usually have certain universal qualities. A protagonist is a character that is normally likable and relatable. We can usually imagine ourselves not only liking this character, but often being this character. And we always see the other events in the story through that character's eyes. Almost always. It's kind of how we know they're the protagonist. The protagonist goes through significant personal changes throughout the story. Examples of protagonists are Neo from The Matrix, Harry Potter from the series that bears his name. We got Luke Skywalker from the original Star Wars episodes 4 through 6. And we have someone from A Wrinkle in Time. I bet you could guess who. Now, we have our protagonist. We're going to put them in a story. But it's not just going to be a story about them sitting in a room, right? Well, there's something called a 3-act structure. And this will go from Acts 1, 2, and 3. In Act 1, all stories introduce a protagonist. They will also introduce other characters. And they will introduce a conflict in the story, something that's wrong, something that the protagonist has to solve and has to deal with. And then it'll end with something called the first doorway. What do I mean by first doorway? I mean at some point in Act 1, the protagonist is going to make a decision to deal with this conflict. And they will kind of step from, kind of normal, boring world into exciting adventure world that's full of magic and conflict and mystery. And they'll usually only do it in a way that the first doorway is going to slam shut behind them and they can't go back. Act 2 is always the longest part of the story. This is where the story really, really happens. It intensifies and grows a conflict, and there's usually a sense of threat. Think about that Harry Potter Chamber of Secrets. There's a big, ugly snake that's paralyzing students and might actually kill them all. Eventually, the protagonist is going to hit the lowest point, and we're going to think all is lost, but somehow the protagonist is going to rise up and they're going to win. And it will build towards what's called the climax. Act 3 is the highest point of the story where all the conflict kind of converges in on itself and the hero is dealing with it and is ready to win or possibly be defeated. We will see the protagonist change dramatically after this climax. We will see the conflict finally resolved, and then there will be a nice ending that's full of a sense of safety. Here's a really easy example of a popular 3-act story. The Parable of the Prodigal Son. Act 1. We see a rich dad, a prodigal rebellious son, and some other son. He's supporting cast. We don't care about him. The prodigal son says to Dad, "Give me my inheritance. I don't care about you anymore." Dad obliges. The prodigal son leaves his homes. He spends money in immoral ways, becomes very poor, and thinks to himself, how many more servants in my father's house have it better than I do? I'm just going to go and clean the pigsties for him. So he decides to go back home. But the father sees him from afar, welcomes him home, and they celebrate together. Now, a lot of you who have read the New Testament, go to church, have Sunday school, go to Bible camps, whatever, you know the parable of the prodigal son. But did you know that this parable was actually in a Act 1, 2, and 3 structure? Go back and read it. It's there. Of course, we can summarize larger stories this way, like Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Act 1. Harry is an ordinary boy who lives with abusive relatives. He lives under the stairs all alone. Then letters begin appearing for him. Finally, Hagrid comes and announces that Harry is a wizard. Harry decides to leave with Hagrid and go to Hogwarts. Can you see the first doorway? Can Harry just decide to go back now? That train only goes one direction. So, Harry meets many new friends at Hogwarts like Ron and Hermione. He also meets rivals like Draco Malfoy. Him and his friends learn something called the Sorcerer's Stone, and they believe that Snape wants to give it to Lord Voldemort. They even believe that Snape is trying to kill Harry in a Quidditch match. They investigate, even though they get into trouble for doing so. Oh, this is Act 2. We've got a conflict, and we're growing it, and we're intensifying it. There's all kinds of bad stuff going on, and trolls, and dogs, and mystery things out of vaults like goblins, and, well, you know the story. Act 3. Harry Potter and his friends search for the stone. They find that it was not Snape, but Quirrell, another teacher who was after the stone. Voldemort is there too, sharing part of Quirrell's body. They try to attack Harry, but fail. Harry passes out and wakes up in a hospital. Dumbledore tells him that he is safe, and that Quirrell is dead, and that Snape was protecting him. Does almost dying sound like the lowest point for a character? Yeah, definitely. Well, it turns out that, the climax, everything was converging, Harry wins, and then we got a nice feeling of safety. I mean, really, what's more safe than waking up in a hospital and Dumbledore telling you that the bad guy is dead? That sounds pretty safe. So, let's go over the assignments now. How about those journal entries? Did you write them? Did the left brain learn to be quiet? And did that right brain get bored? I bet both those things happened. So, this week, go ahead and read and summarize one of the Harry Potter character articles, and summarize your favorite movie or book. By the way, you're not off hook on the journals either. Go ahead and just keep writing, keep that pen moving, for 3 to 5 times this week, in addition to doing these 2 assignments here. Educator.com is here to help you, and thank you for continuing to use it.